We're back.
Okay, thank you. We're back after that little break. We left off at the Recreation Department, which is on, the actual budget starts on page 68 of the council's packets. As far as the operational budget of the rec department goes, a lot of items have been shuffled around, fine-tuning them, but the overall rec budget is more or less the same. We've shifted some wages down and some operational costs up. See Cindy sneaking in behind me. The rec department operates uniquely from other municipal departments where they collect revenue for fees for programs and then use those fees to operate the programs. They also pay some of that revenue back into the town's general fund to offset the operations of their rec budget, their general operating budget. So that being said, Cindy's here to answer any questions you might have on the rec budget, but we're not proposing any major changes this year other than trying to fine tune some costs. You talking about the revenue? Yeah, we just noticed a typo. It doesn't affect your financials at all, but on page 69, the note at the bottom of revenue of $177,524 in this budget is contributed by rec impact fees. That number is actually higher and has been higher. What's the number, Sharon?
Yeah.
I think it's Sharon's tracking it down, but last year, the year before, we started to increase that contribution from the rec fees to offset operational costs.
317,327.
317,327. So we'll update that footnote. Again, does not affect any numbers. It's just a note that didn't get updated. So the, lack of a better term, the enterprise account for the rec department, money comes in, money goes out, fluctuates as the year progresses. So as programs happen, they take in revenue, then expend the money on the programs. This number that comes back into the town to offset operations comes out of that amount. Any questions on operations in the rec department? More or less the same. Again, we're trying to fine tune a lot of the costs, especially at the ball fields and facilities, narrowing down what our actual expenditures are and if we could fine tune those. You want me to move on to multi-purpose field? To the next one. So the next couple cost centers are actual facilities, so no huge change. A lot of, Cindy can speak to it or answer any questions, but a lot of our fields, I think, somebody in the public may just think, oh, you just mow it. There's a lot of costs that go into maintaining the fields, and it depends on the field and the facility and how much use it gets. From irrigation at some sites to lawn treatments and everything in between. Little Falls Rec Area would be on page 71. And again, another one we're trying to fine tune a little bit. So we have working toilets up there now. There's a fee for that. Water, drinkable water, irrigation, maintenance, and water supply as well. Any questions?
Just a quick question. So the bathrooms are usable and the snack shack?
I don't know if they are at this
Okay.
moment.
Yep.
They just got the water turned on,
Okay.
so we'll get up there and do one more final cleanup. But yes, they're ready.
Good.
Yep. Finally.
Cherry Hill Farm, although it's not a municipal property on the next page, the reason we started putting a cost center there is we had a porta potty there. That would be the contracted services. Ideally, if the stars align, we may have one of those pit privies like the Weeks Road property has down there to, we'll have to maintain and have waste disposal. We didn't really want to create a cost center just for one pit privy for the Weeks Road parcel. So that's included on Cherry Hill as well. In the future, we could separate that, but that's kind of an educated guess right now. I think it's going to depend on the frequency, the contract, how often they need to be pumped, cleaned, all that good stuff. And I think, Sharon, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we're using 100% TIF funding to cover the Cherry Hill's costs. TIF funding on Cherry Hill, we used 100% of.
That's 100%.
Yeah. Okay. Shaw Park, very similar. I think Cindy is working on somebody to stay up there right now. I think that's a struggle right at the moment.
If anybody knows anybody who has their own camper, come for a week, come for the summer, I'll take however many it takes to cover it. The idea is that it's eyes and ears, open and close the gate, 8 a.m., 8 p.m., but it's eyes and ears overnight. It's definitely our security system up there. So yeah, we are looking for a new steward, and yeah, that's kind of where we are.
There is an item in Capital Part 2 to help us get, is it Capital Part 2? Did I put that in there? Did I put that in there? My memory's fading. There may be an item in Capital Part 2. We're gonna have to look. But one goal that we have is to get cameras up and running up there to help, because it's kind of, it's not really, ours, as you know, you kind of drive in and it's dead end, and we've had some issues as far as vandalism up there. So, something we're working on in the future. Roby Park, we made a cost center, just given the fact that we're starting to invest in the park now. Any questions there for me or Cindy?
Just in regards to the master plan that was recently approved, I mean, I don't think it makes sense to do all that stuff in one budget cycle or anything. Is there like a plan that's being put together for like, let's chip off at this plan over the next 5 years or something, or?
As far as, we haven't had the discussion as far as the implementation of every item on the plan. Tom is working with an engineer right now to do preliminary engineering that would get us to certain components of the plan, and then we could chip away at everything from trees to the water feature to whatever it is. I think overall it's a lot of money, but to your point, if we whittle away at it, grant funding, donations, town contributions, but the preliminary engineering helps us out with everything from the ball field to the park, and that's the first step.
The group also, just to keep going, the group that was the committee is still working on what's their next move?
Oh.
And do they have a next move? Do they become a Friends of?
Nice.
And or establish a Friends of Roby Park? I do think the engineering is critical to the whole project. Much easier to go out and have an ask of somebody, much like the skate park. You know, any of our earth-moving companies, of which we have several, you know, even just that first perimeter stone path.
Yeah.
If it's engineered and it's there, and we go and ask, would you contribute to this and or do this? Here it is. A lot easier sell than, well, where do you want it, and what's it going to take? And when it's engineered, we have it. It's like, well, here's where on the planet, here's what it's going to take, who's interested. And hopefully that just kind of feeds another one, feeds another one, feeds another one.
I don't know if that was an omen, but it just started pouring rain outside. I had high hopes for today. Old Roby School, again, not a huge change. I know we're going to be talking about that facility moving forward, but for the most part, it doesn't cost us a ton to operate it outside of capital expenditures that we may have from time to time. Any questions? Little Falls Activity Center, same thing. There's some money in Capital Part 2 to address some exterior upgrades. I don't know if we'll have enough to do all the electrical upgrades. The plan is to take the old generator from the fire station, which still works, but was just undersized to power the entire fire station, and potentially move it to that site so it could be used as a shelter, or, you know, have more capability during storm events, things like that.
Would you explain the 6450 that seems to have moved up to contracted services from the building maintenance? Because it's the same amount. This is in the Little Falls Activity Center.
I think that when we went to Munis, real contracted services, for example, that would include our cleaning service, our pest management, they were all sort of like in building maintenance, everything was in there. So now that we have the ability to actually have these separate lines, this is Sharon's way of saying everybody has their money in the right pot where it belongs, in the right title.
It seemed interesting.
And-
Thanks.
And that's something I should probably have mentioned earlier. This year's budget, as you're seeing it, is the new Munis accounts in a Google format spreadsheet, or Google Sheets, the way we used to do it. We weren't at the point where we could do Munis 100%, but in next year, it's likely that you'll see this will look totally different. All the numbers will be the same, but it'll be a Munis printout through the Munis system. It wasn't ready to, I think similar to the school department, they weren't really ready to make that transition yet either. So, but the line items have been, we've tried to simplify the accounting of, contracted service is a contracted service versus building maintenance versus any number of things. Sewer is sewer expenses, and irrigation is irrigation, and water is water, and stuff like that. So.
Step forward, baby steps.
Cindy, since we're at the Little Falls Activity Center, I was wondering if the rec department contributes anything to the Lakes Region Senior Center.
What do we do?
Financially, do we give them any money?
Well, we provide the space for them. The town in general does. We don't charge them for their space. We actually just put a rooftop AC unit in there, worked with Kenny on that. So their space is the only cooling space in the whole building. So basically they're a 9 to 3 operation. They come in when the kids are gone from before school. They leave when the kids come back for after school. In the summertime, we kind of coexist during junior camp. They have potlucks. They have a speaker come. They need to extend their space. They want to use the gym. They have an outside picnic. Whatever they're doing is, we're sort of fiscally not so much supporting them as we are physically. They use our minibus when they want to go on a trip. They get a VIPS to drive for them, and they go to lunch. That's how we support the Lake Region Senior Center.
Got it. So it doesn't necessarily show up monetarily, but we do a lot of, it sounds like, staff time and
Yep,
energy.
we're a little busy. Julio's their number one contact.
Excellent. Thank you, Cindy, and thank you, Julio. Okay.
Roby Gym, again, similar dynamic as far as just showing the cost center for the building itself. Relatively inexpensive to operate for the most part. I did want to point out the electrical cost. There is an electric car charger off that. We get the revenue from it, but it shows up at that facility because it's hooked to the actual meter on that building. Any other questions for Cindy while she's up here? Thanks, Cindy. Economic development, one of these days we'll smart it up and we'll put it near Tom's stuff so he doesn't have to keep coming up. But this is 100% funded through TIF revenue. The position, this was very much part-time Kevin started right before the pandemic hit. So 2019 and before, this was part-time, really kind of a reduced operation from how we operate now. But as we continue to move forward with it, I don't want to ever just say we throw money at because it's TIF money. We also want to refine those expenses and costs. So there's varying projects, dynamics, behind the scenes work that's going on with economic development. And overall, it's not just one person, it's kind of a philosophy that we're trying to move the town in a direction to promote economic development, small business growth, getting businesses through the pipeline, and then, you know, behind the scenes, trying to recruit big businesses to come to town, mixed uses, things like that. So Tom can answer any specific questions on it, or I'm happy to as well.
I just had a question. Now that there's 2 people in this position, I know Kevin uses an electric car.
Mhm.
Is it just 1 car allocated to economic development, or are there 2, because there are 2 of them now? or-
There's one car they fight over it.
Okay.
But no, technically speaking, there is one electric vehicle, although there's a staff car for this building. I don't think there's
Okay.
a huge need that there's another vehicle or anything like that. For the most part, all the departments work great together, and if we
Okay.
need a vehicle, we borrow and steal from another department.
You maybe explained this last time, I don't remember though. What are retention activities? What is that?
It's a very generic term. Tom could talk about the specifics, but it could be anything that we can do to retain a business or economic activity in the town of Gorham. And Tom could talk to some of the stuff that they've tried. Maybe it's worked, maybe it hasn't worked, and, you know, moving forward, how we're going to do that.
So one thing that we noticed with one economic development director is trying to get retention activities was hard. So for a while there, his time was tied up with so many things. Retention committees or things were hard to implement. We started to move in that direction, working to identify businesses, help them with advertising, anything that we can do to promote Gorham businesses. That's what we try to do with regarding those items. I think we've done things at the Sea Dog games, trying to get businesses and promote businesses in Gorham, things like that. So really, it's anything we can do to give our businesses a leg up. We've talked about doing food truck events, maybe at the industrial park, things like that, to thank our businesses for choosing and being in Gorham.
I'm just wondering if, I know we've talked a lot about kind of putting some energy into getting the business exchange back on the ground, and maybe this is an area where we might be able to put some energy into that, or at least something like the marketplace. We've talked about it. Maybe that's where we might get some money to be able to do that. Just thinking out loud here.
Yeah, I think there's definitely the potential to do that. The revenue would be there to help facilitate it. Maybe not a whole person, but just it's flexible enough that we can look at items like that. The other thing I didn't mention is with a TIF-funded project, that money just doesn't roll into the general fund at the end of the year. It goes back into the TIF. So the good thing about it is if we don't use it like immediately in 1 year, it goes back into that TIF fund. So it's not getting gobbled up for other uses or capital projects or something like that. So I know we're going to talk about that in future capital improvement committee meetings, and we've had initial discussions. We're going to have bigger discussions. So, but I think a lot of these line items are flexible enough that it doesn't have to be exactly for one thing. But if something like that came along,
I've
and
been
we-
looking through the whole budget, trying to figure out, okay, where can we take a few from here, a few from there, to do
I-
something to help the businesses.
Yeah, and I suspect if, depending on the scale of anything that we looked at bringing back or modifying or having an event, you know, if it's a large event that needed more funding, we can allocate more TIF funding for a large event, or this could be seed money to start something like that as well.
Good, thanks.
I have a question about the GDC money. What do they generally spend their money on?
Coffee. No, just, no, they have all kinds of projects that they've done over the years. Then now that fluctuates from year to year. Some years they don't use a lot of their money, other years they do. What have we done in the past couple of years?
They utilized their fund to get the GVA up and going, if you remember,
VA,
being a Main Street community.
business outreach, they've done some of that with some of the funding.
Website, pictures.
Website, overhaul, maintenance, some of the stuff in the industrial park in the past, I think they've dabbled in that. So it's just, it's a set amount of money that's at their disposal for projects if they want to take something on that requires a financial commitment.
Does that carry over year to year and pool up, or does it go away?
It goes back in the TIF fund.
Okay.
One of the things that I'd like to see, I know we've portioned off grants for economic development for businesses here. We had the facade grant, and then the other one was an equipment grant.
Yeah, improvements in equipment.
Yeah, I would love to see the end result of those. For just if we send the money off, I know it gets told, oh, we gave this to a few businesses, but actually, I mean, photos or write-ups from the Economic Development Office showing what the money's really gone towards and how it's changed, especially like the facade grant. Photos of facades would be nice.
Well, almost like a success story.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's so new that we haven't necessarily got to that point. The money's gone out. I don't know the status. I haven't checked in on that, but.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin can put something together once it's completed.
And this is more or less the operational budget of economic development. So later in the budget, we have some other items like the business grants and one-time or ongoing expenses that may not just be in the operation budget. Any other questions for Tom Weiser?
The revolving loan fund, where does that sit in all of this? Is it kind of just separate? Yeah.
It's 100% separate. That was funded through a TIF. Through a TIF. The contribution from the TIF has since ceased in the, I haven't checked the balance recently, but I think it fluctuates around $1 million up and down of revenue that's in it. So if we ever got to the point where we need to put more money into it, we could use TIF money for that. But it got to the point where we looked at it and we're like, okay, when that TIF got renewed, we felt confident that we didn't have to keep dumping money into it. But it's not a yearly operational expense.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Then everyone's favorite, debt service on page 80. Various bonds have been refinanced, combined, fire trucks, Little Falls renovation, our public safety, Main Street payments towards the bond that for our contribution for DOT. And the most recent, our industrial park bond in 2020. And the industrial park bond, what's the other one, Sharon, that has TIF money associated with it? I know the industrial park bond is paid for 100% through TIF.
Yep.
Is there another?
The library, portion of the library.
Portion of the library as well. Then on the following sheet, essentially the interest payments for said bonds, just broken down. Any questions on that? We have details on all the bonds when they come up. This building, as I previously mentioned, the last payment on it is this year for the renovation of it.
Is there a way for us to see that?
We have.
I know you just said you have it, but like in this packet, so we know, hey, this one's gonna
Yeah, I think
expire.
we could, between now and when you vote on the budget, we could put, we'll have to find a way to condense it, because we have the Excel spreadsheets, but I'm sure we can come up with a, bond, termination date,
Okay.
something, yeah.
That would be great.
Yep. And Councilor Pratt's favorite, the county tax on page 82. Actually, we didn't take that much of a hit this year, and that also includes 1/5. We opted to do over 5 years. The county went from a calendar year to a fiscal year, and a little bit more in there.
So is the county tax included in the 0%, or is that going to be in addition to?
It's in addition, but it's one of those, like, depending on which way you round up, so it might be like a penny, 2 pennies.
Okay, but it's not included in the zero
Not
currently?
included in ours.
Okay.
But I think right now on our spreadsheet with the rounding that we have, it's a penny, not even a penny. You have that?
Right, I mean, it's 30,000, so if you do the math roughly.
It depends which way we round
Right.
up and down, but
Right.
it's minuscule as far as the mill rate increase.
Yeah.
Yeah, right now it's showing 0, but it may be a
Right,
penny.
okay. Thank you.
Yep. Insurance policies, multi-peril, public liability. From time to time, we farm these out. Any questions on that?
We go through MMA for that
Yeah,
still?
we'll go through MMA, yeah. Yeah. Usually they come in the most competitive, and then you obviously too have to, there's so many liabilities that are specific to municipalities, we have to make sure it's not like a homeowner's insurance or something like that. It's not as easy to compare. But, yeah. Employee benefits, the next page, which would be page 84. Benefits and employees make up a large chunk of our municipal operating budget. We do have health insurance premium increases, I think like most people. They're more manageable than they have been in the past. And then we do an HRA, so we pay a high premium, we don't try to pay the highest premium, we pay a higher premium policy with, excuse me, I got that backwards. Lower premium policy with higher deductibles, with the likelihood, and the town did this many years ago, and a lot of towns have done this, in any given year, most employees don't hit that deductible. So as a whole, by reimbursing for that deductible for employees, we save a lot of money than paying for the Cadillac plans that 10, 20 years ago, a lot of municipalities did. FICA costs, retirement, Medicare, tuition reimbursement, that's kind of a by request for all departments. So something the town used to do, we've kind of thrown a little bit of money in there, and we have employees that pursue it. So it's not a guaranteed amount for anyone, but a department has to submit a request to my office, and it's a case-by-case basis.
I'm surprised it's not used more.
Yeah, the public's, I think the police department, we have a more specific policy towards the union, but I don't think we have that with the fire union. But it's been utilized, and it's not just like one person taking $13,000. It's many people doing class here, there, and then we basically pay what the USM price is for quorum. Main paid family leave, that is a half of a year to start when that law goes into effect at the end of this calendar year, start of the next calendar year. That is our, running out of steam, Christy, correct me if I'm wrong, that's our 0.5% for us. The employee pays a 0.5%. So it'll be about $50,000 for a full fiscal year, give or take. And we are still not sure how that applies. It's going through rulemaking and decision making, and it's a fiasco, but the school department has that same expense on their side as well as basically all employers. And other stuff in here that you're familiar with, but wage adjustments, that's where the cost of living adjustments are. Gorham's been doing that for a long time, has its pros and cons. There's a 4% COLA budgeted in there for non-union employees. Then there's a little wiggle room for mid-year salary adjustments. So if we have a market adjustment, or if we have to pay a little bit more to get a very qualified employee, there's a little bit of money in there for that. Any questions on benefits?
What's the wellness program?
The wellness program. We have a bunch of employees that, we've always had a wellness program, and MMA, the Health Trust, gives us actually that amount, right? Because I'm matching it. Gives us that amount. They do lectures, wellness activities, programs for employees throughout the year for just general wellness programs. This is the first year the Wellness Committee approached me for a little bit of matching funding, to match that grant funding, to try to amplify their programs. It's actually pretty well attended townwide, and a pretty diverse group from all departments.
Thank you.
Public agencies, this is where we kind of put our link to GORM services that the towns had, Conservation Commission, GPCOG, MMA, North Gorham Library, contribution towards their operating costs, and Metro for the Husky line has always been there, but then you'll see the new dollar figure. I actually may refine this, so I put this placeholder in before we got the assessment. It's a couple $1,000s less, so we'll fine tune it before we actually vote on it. And that's paid for with TIF funds. GoCam. They keep everything running, and so people can see us. No major changes, I think, to their operations. We did absorb making that, we had a shared part-time position halfway through last fiscal year. We absorbed that to make it a full-time position. It was a shared position with the library. Things have been going well, and I commend them for their hard work. It's amazing what they can do with the limited resources that they have. Any questions? Somebody's going to ask a question here.
Just
Move on to the next section. I got
I
plenty of
know.
questions.
I know there's plenty of questions coming up. Don't worry. Other town services is kind of a catch-all. Meal site, town clock. There's some TIF money that we're rolling in here. So village landscaping. That could include our facilities. We haven't got a contractor lined up yet. I think we're working on that. Who was working on that for me? Landscaping? Yeah, so we're working on that. So we never really took an active approach with having a coordinated effort of landscaping and making the village look nice as far as the town went. A lot of volunteers have always done that. We can use TIF funding for that. Relatively small expense. Village expenses, I put in a token amount. Terry's gonna have a stroke, but we're getting new lampposts down South Street, so banners, things like that. You know, that as we grow as a community, that stuff that is specific to the village that is expensive but isn't a huge expense, we can dip into that. Holiday lights, all our beautiful lights, that has been paid for out of the TIF district in the past and is handled by a professional company. Some of the facilities the departments do, but everything in the village is a professional company. Senior property tax assistance, we increased more. Part of that I think was the reval, and then part of that was more demand on the program. That's where basically if a senior qualifies, we give them a rebate. It's not a discount on their taxes, it's a rebate after they pay their taxes. And any other questions on anything else in there? I mean, the business capital grant program and the town council's contingency is also in that line item.
So I have a question about the Lions Club flags. It looks like we never had in the actual columns.
Memorial and.
Yeah, it may have been,
okay.
it may have been coded wrong. I think they did, because we purchased them. I'm pretty sure that came. Laura,
Okay.
you handle that normally? Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that we were not, you know.
And it's a relatively small amount, so if they go over 1 year, we make sure
Yeah.
they have what they need, because they
Okay.
volunteer their time to tackle that for us.
Okay, and then obviously that business capital grant program is what Counselor Siegel was mentioning earlier.
Yep.
But it's going to be under here instead of the economic development part of the budget, or?
I put it in here because it's kind of a separate program. And if we ever threw money at it, I don't want it to look like the operational budget's going up and down.
Oh,
So if the
okay.
council came to me 1 year and says, I want you to double that,
Mhm.
I don't want to reflect in their operating budget. That's
Okay.
why we plucked it in here. It is still TIF funded. Any questions?
Do you think the senior property tax assistance, do you think that is a decent dollar amount? Do you think you'll be wanting more?
It's, I think it should cover it, and based on historical trends. We also, and I don't know if we used it this year, we set aside that pool of money. If we don't use it, we tuck it away because we know there may be a spike in it.
Okay.
But
That's good to know.
the data's been it's trending upwards, but it's been fairly consistent, I believe, on the number of applicants. And I mean, we only have so many seniors, and I think more and more learn about it and apply. But it's not hopping all over the place.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yep.
Can you explain why it can't be a discount, why it has to be a rebate?
It's a legal state requirement, so we can't, go back to the thing about state taxes or the way property taxes have to be governed. That's why it has to be a reimbursement. We cannot discount someone's taxes unless it's legally allowed by the state.
Got it.
Or a program.
Got it.
Homestead exemption, veterans.
Got it. And what makes someone eligible for this?
I forget the specifics of it, but it's been a while since I've actually dove into it. Your value of your home, what you pay in taxes, your income, and your age are qualifying factors. And then you can, is it 500 is the highest we give? 500, and then it can be prorated down to a smaller amount. There's some people that just don't qualify based on their income, but I'm surprised it's actually, the parameters of it from a financial perspective have worked for us. They haven't allowed it to go up and down. And do you remember, Lori, how many people applied? And we didn't deny that many, 60, 70 people, something like that.
Thank you.
And I can put a footnote in there, X amount of applications last year or something like that, so we have that information.
Thank you.
Moving on, this is where we've started to throw in some more TIF money, and another reason that so there's like a $400,000 increase that wasn't there last year. The non-road matching grant funds, so this would not be road projects, but again, I put a little bit of money in the budget every year so that if there's a substantial grant that requires a substantial match, that money is available for departments. Most years we use that. So like if there's an AFG grant or a police department grant or the library gets a grant and there's a 10% match, they can pull out of that. Ambulance is a big one. So an ambulance, and I double checked this legally, is a TIF eligible expense. This was going to be in Capital Part 2. Capital Part 2 was taking a hit from the fire engine. You guys are killing me over there. We used to have, this used to be called Capital Part 1. And when I started working for the town, there was like 1 or 2 projects with a minuscule amount, and that's because it's on the mill rate. None of them were TIF funded at the time, so that's why I'm plugging them in here. They're not a Capital Part 2 project, and they're TIF funded. So there's an ambulance replacement. These ambulances, we are getting our lifespan out of them. Like fire engines, there is a delivery delay, and the full intent with the ambulances is that we try to space them out on their replacement schedules, so they're not all coming up at the same time, so they're well spread out. So by the time this one goes into service, the most recent one we would have purchased would have been 3 to 4 years ago. So out of the 3, they're spaced out every 3 or 4 years apart, theoretically, but that could change. There's a UTV in there for fire police. They requested a lot more than that, but that is also TIF funded and for special events. I'm sure it will be used for fire suppression, but it's not uncommon, and we're one of the few large municipalities that doesn't have a resource available to our law enforcement or our firefighters that get them around like that. If they want to go and get some grants to put some fancy stuff on it, I'm all for that, but this is the basic unit itself. And then a ribbon snowblower for the trackless machine. I actually saw this. I talked to the deputy director quite a bit about this. This would primarily be used in the village, hence why it's TIF funded. And compared to the traditional snowblower that's on the front of the machine, it works a lot better. And they saw this the last couple of storms. It's just a different type of snowblower, and it will suck up everything in front of it versus the traditional and older style that we have. So that's another project that's in there. Any questions on any of that? Other than the $35,000 for non-grant, for matching funds, everything in there is TIF funded.
Pardon my ignorance here, what is a UTV?
Utility train vehicle? Essentially a four-wheeler, side-by-side, you know, that like a big golf cart. but they go off-road.
Got it.
But primarily, I mean, public safety would use them at events, getting around if you had a property or an area that you couldn't access, wildland urban interface fires, getting a patient out of a area that you can't get a normal, well, trails. Trails was the other big selling point is, somebody gets hurt out in the middle of the trail, you're either carrying them out or you use one of these.
Got it, thank you.
Okay, there's no more questions, moving on. Road projects. So road projects are proposed to be funded at the balance of Capital Part 2. I do kind of start with a goal in mind for road projects. This is less than last year. Talking to the director, although I'm sure they would like millions and millions, there is also a logistical concern with getting projects done. So we don't want to have a backlog, but I also want to contribute more money. This is still better than we've been doing, or in some past years. I think we got as low as $500,000 or $600,000 one year. But as you can see, projects can eat into that very quickly. And we were over $2 million last year. This year would be just under 1.3. This is not to say that these will be done in this exact order, but these are the priority projects that Public Works has lined up for general overlays, culvert replacements, and at any point, if we can leverage grant money, PAX money, DEP money, we will do it. If you want, I'm happy to answer any questions, or Terry can answer, or Terry or Chuck on the specifics of any of the engineering or planning of these.
So you're saying these aren't in order of the projects, but are they in you are saying they are a priority, so starting at number one
Yes.
is
Yeah,
a higher priority than the bottom of the list?
Priority, but I leave discretion to Public Works if it makes logistical sense for a project to be bumped to a next year, 2 fiscal years from now. If we get a grant for the Buck Street culvert, I'm making this up, and the grant money is not available until FY26, we'll defer that.
We'll move it, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Capital projects on page 93. We're throwing in a little bit more money on TIF funds for the village pedestrian lights. We're not 100% sure where that project's going to land. That is TIF revenue. If it's not used, it goes back into the TIF district. The village pedestrian, hold on, no, I'm looking at the wrong one. Never mind, that's an old one. Wayfinding signage. So we're doing an RFP that's out, came back. I forget, we have so many RFPs going on. Yeah, it's coming back to have a consultant do wayfinding signage, branding for the town. That'll eat up a good chunk of the money we already have. This is actually to go out and buy and put out signs. And we've been cautioned by other municipalities, this is a portion of that cost. It's incredibly expensive to do stuff like this. We'll bring that back to the council, get a little feedback on where you want us to hit first. But that's the estimate is based on another municipality's expenses for doing a good chunk of their town. Tannery Brook Boardwalk Connector is a TIF eligible expense. That's been a project that's been talked about for a while that I know the Conservation Commission wants to tackle, connecting the trail networks. That's up behind the bank-ish kind of area.
Yeah, bank and village.
Yep. South Street sidewalk curbing and drainage. So this is a PAX project. We know that we are in line through our region to leverage $250,000 for drainage and curbing and sidewalk improvements down South Street as far as it'll go. That's pretty much a done deal. Each region gets $400,000 a year. This coming year, we've been allocated $250,000, meaning we got in a fight with the other towns and we beat up enough of them that we got $250,000. So that'll be our match for that so that we can leverage it. That is in the TIF district. It's an eligible expense. Otherwise, we probably, one thing I want to point out with that is if we didn't have that TIF money that's saving us money in other places, it would have been a low priority for us to go get that matching grant, because then it competes with normal road maintenance, and we've been able to do things like that. Sidewalk replacement out here, as you can see, they've the salt's taken a toll on them. That number may fluctuate or go back in if we don't use it all. fiber traffic connections to Libby Ave. So this is to try to get our traffic signals in the village to talk to the Libby Avenue traffic signal on Main Street. If we connect them with fiber, they can talk to each other. Not that traffic is backed up there, but when the systems are tuned enough, it could be, okay, I know that a block of traffic is coming through this signal. These signals can talk to these signals, and they can just move traffic along if they can talk to each other, and that's what this expense is for. Preble Street Common, Capital Improvements Committee, as well as town staff have been talking about improvements to that facility or that area, which could be fencing, granite posts, all kinds of nice things. It's an application. Any questions?
A little bit more of a comment suggestion, but on the wayfinding signage, I think that RFP is mostly like physical signs. A fellow counselor made a mention that, I guess, Westbrook, for example, has a lot of information on parking on their website, and I wasn't able to find it on their website myself, but I thought that was an interesting idea, and I don't have a specific example of a town that does that well, but some amount of information readily accessible on the website might be a more cost-effective way to inform people in addition to the actual signage that's going to be out there.
Thank you. Excellent point. I think this one is, although it will have parking components, it's more Gorham Downtown Village. I'm sure there will be parking signs associated with it, but that won't be the focus of it. It's more just getting, like a lot of like Scarborough, Falmouth, some of the other communities have their, this way to this district, and, trail network over here, or, a historical district this way, kind of thing. And a lot of that is just driven the cost per sign. It's just very expensive for the custom signs.
Well, and that again, if there's some way to do some of it online.
One area that we've
Potentially
explored
cheaper.
with the staff, not specific for parking, is we've tried to make a push, and every once in a while we remind everybody, things like Google Maps. There's a lot of ways that we can easily manipulate, or add, not manipulate, but add to the data that's out there for, this is public parking, and when you're in your car, it shows up and it says there's public parking because somebody from here typed it in.
Right.
Or, a better access to a ball field, or whatever it is. So we try to update that from time to time. It's kind of a directive of the individual departments. Any other questions on this? I use Lee as a gauge on how I'm doing.
I'm trying to keep it in line here for you, so,
Page 92, the non.
We're spending money and I don't like it, so, yeah.
So, the ordinance committee and town staff spent a lot of time building out a pedestrian and sidewalk map for where we want sidewalks and where we don't. And we have a whole list on 91 of all the road projects and all the things we want to do. Now that we know where we want sidewalks in town and where we don't, I would love, love, love to see which roads do we care about getting sidewalks first. Where's the prioritized list for pedestrian infrastructure is what I'm hoping for.
I think we could work on that. I don't know if we've tackled that at the staff level. These are either priority rebuilds or points that we know in our really dense areas, there's no connection point. Access road, we have a sidewalk network down Narragansett, and there's no point to get to the high school. Technically, you can walk down the side of the road, but there's no way to get off the road. Ballpark, we had allocated a little bit of money towards, we're gonna need a little bit more to go around access. That's in the Roby Park Master Plan and right here, obviously in the village, but I think we could do that as far as a priority wish list of new construction, and then priority wish list of rebuilds. Like the Green Street sidewalk is very old, and the trees are uplifting it everywhere, and that's going to be a delicate one to work on. But yeah, we can work on that.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. And just to throw out you can't fully get to the middle school through sidewalk. It stops, and it would be helpful because it's a voting place having full sidewalk all the way there.
It stops on Weeks Road, doesn't have a connection?
Yeah.
Are you talking about in the subdivision, or are you talking about on Weeks Road? Because Weeks Road connects. projects.
No, yeah, no, I think it's directly at the middle school. There's a spot that's still missing sidewalk.
Oh, on the middle school property.
Oh,
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm not sure we can look at that. I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm gonna walk it before the next council meeting and come back with, all right.
If Public Works would know, because they'll plow it one way or another, but we can do that. I just don't know off the top of my head.
Apparently neither do I.
There is also a way to cut through some subdivisions to get there as well. Where did we leave off? So are we on capital part 2? Did I skip anything?
Nope, capital part 2.
One's favor. You want me to go down project per project real quick, or do you want to ask questions about any project, or do you want to handle it?
I was gonna say, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory as long as everybody's read it, so I don't think you need to go down through it. So unless people have, as long as people, have specific questions, I guess we can go through that.
I will say that this trended downwards a little this year. I think it's going to trend downwards next year. I think, we may be approaching the, not the peak per se, but the peak usages of this economy on fees and more revenue coming in, but we'll see. But we've definitely eaten a little bit more of that revenue that would be going into capital part 2 next year, so.
Can you give a brief explanation just for anybody at home that's gonna watch this that doesn't know what capital part 2 is off? I mean, I have a different way of explaining it than you do, and you're gonna be way better than me, so.
Years ago, the town council adopted a policy, which the town council has stayed true to, of taking the town's operational budget, overall budget, and operational or overall?
The town and the school
Operational or overall budget, though? They go
operation.
operational budgets, budgeted amounts, having that number, timesing it, or multiplying that by 8%, and we keep that 8% in our general fund at all times. Anything on 8.5%, Sharon's here to correct me. We keep everything, we keep that 8.5% in there. One, it has a contingency, which is good for just general operations and cash flow. And then it also helps us with bond rating companies as well. But then everything above and beyond that is available for capital projects for the town for the following year. The one thing to remember is, although the school has a general fund amount that is in there in the cash flow it gets complicated, but yeah, it's a negative balance, but that we cover. But where was I going with that? Most of the revenues that go in there are the result of excess or town spending that has not happened, so we have money left in our budget at the end of the year, or revenues that come in higher that are for specific town use. Excise tax for roads, ambulance billing, things like that, building permits. That money, anything over 8.5%, comes into capital part 2. So that number varies from year to year. When times are good, meaning we have excess revenues, we invest without impacting the mill rate. We invest in capital projects. Since I have been here, the lowest we had was 700,000, 800,000 maybe one year. It's in its history, it got down to around $100,000 one year. And it's been all over the place. So I think we hit a high of just over $4 million one year. Now it's starting to trend downward because we're eating more of those revenues and the revenues aren't coming in as aggressively. But this is, without impacting the mill rate, it's the opportunity for the town to use town revenues to pay for capital projects that we need. And the money just doesn't go as far as it used to. That's the other complicating factor here, so.
Thank you.
I probably made that more complicated than it needed to be.
No, that was good.
Basically,
That was
all the
better
money
than
that's
my
left over,
explanation.
the council can authorize for capital projects.
And generally, it's only revenues that come in. Can the TIF funds, if there's a particular item that aligns with the TIF fund definition, you'll try to find a way to use those instead, or it's only revenues?
If there's a
coming
TIF funded, so prior to a couple of years ago, the town's TIF funds were limited and very narrowly tailored. We've since broadened the scope of those TIF districts and allowed more acceptable projects. It would not be funded on the capital part 2 list, but like the ambulance. Yeah, that was a request from the fire department to fund the ambulance. I went through the list with the attorney and I'm like, does this pass the straight face test? She's like, absolutely it does. So I plucked it off the list.
That's why it's in that line.
Now there's $350,000 more available for another project because it was funded with TIF money.
Got it.
And I can't emphasize enough, TIF funds help us, let me phrase this. We leave money on the table. So if we are a wealthy municipality in the eyes of the state, we have more value. We leave school funding on the table, we leave revenue sharing on the table, and we have a higher county tax commitment. If we reduce that, we get just as much money in school funding over the next couple of years, and we don't pay as much in county tax, and we get more revenue sharing. It's a win-win as long as we have a use for that money. And trust me, we have a use for that money in a variety of areas. So I'm glad they're working out. The village TIF has been doing well, and it's allowed us to be flexible with positions to some degree, and then projects. So I'm sorry, do you want me to go through real quick every line by line, or do you want to ask questions?
No, just
I mean,
ask
I could point
questions.
out the big stuff if you want. Generally, a capital part 2 project needs to be a larger one-time cost. I'll often get requests for, I'll never put a position in here or something that's an ongoing expense. And I tried to stay away from your small requests, like something that could be absorbed in an operating budget, a $2,500 request or something like that. But you can see, like number 2, 10-wheel dump truck, a wheeler for Public Works with plow gear. Terry, pre-COVID, Terry or Jeff, what would that truck have cost us? $250,000 5 years ago for that truck is now $370,000, and we have to wait for it if we're lucky and get one. I will point out, like the box sweeper for Public Works, number 6, Public Works is also renting more sweepers to offset the operations of our sweeper. Our sweeper is a very maintenance intensive, not used all year round, but used throughout the year, and a very expensive item to replace. So if we can get more life out of that, we're all about it. There's the fire engine, that will be a referendum question. So we have to ask the voters for a single capital project, permission to spend over roughly $500,000. The question will be on the June ballot. We're not bonding it. It'll be funded in capital part 2 as proposed. It's under $1 million, and I just have a hard time borrowing that for that amount of money.
Generally, this is where I point out that there's some things in capital part 2 for the police station that's fairly new, and the fire station. This isn't anything bad for the council or fire department or police department. It's just to what you said before about going with the cheapest, amount for a project usually makes it so that we have to do repairs later. So, because there was a renovation of, the fire department, and we still have to do floors and things like that, so.
And to your point, some of these problems were apparent when the buildings were opened or renovated, and then other ones are cropping up years down the road. Like the flooring and the water damage in the fire department was because parts of the showers where the duty crew lives and the live-in students, they weren't properly done, and the damage is discovered years later, and the flooring's all ripped up. And some of it's through insurance claims, other parts of it can't be insurance claims, and yeah, I don't know. I suspect we have spent as much money as it would have been if we had gone with a different bid on some of
I
these
definitely think
projects.
so. I mean, even looking back at capital part 2, since then, there's always been something.
Yep.
So. Just a question about the recreational facilities master plan. That's different than the open space plan, or?
Yeah, that would be specific for facilities. I don't know where we would draw the line on like trail networks and stuff like that, but I think it's more ball fields, buildings, infrastructure.
Okay, because I feel like we had some of that in our facilities study, correct? Or we had some of the fields and things like that, and they made recommendations for?
Not recently. Yes and no. The staff recommended that we do this before we do the comp plan.
Okay.
Well, like some of them, like even the Chick property has a plan for a rec center that was a concept years ago and probably never will come to fruition on that facility or on that property anytime soon.
Okay.
I think I'm gonna get someone's gonna give me some trouble for bringing this up, but we put aside 265,000 for lights, and now we're now asking, we now need an extra 300,000. That's over $500,000 to put in lights on a Little League field, and we're talking about so many other things. I do want to hear from Cindy and perhaps the town engineer on what is happening here and if this money is useful.
I think it may be, if I can't answer it, it's probably more a Chuck response, the town engineer. So the 265,000 ARPA money was allocated. That would need to be spent not this year, but by the following year by the council towards ball field lights at the Little League field in Little Falls. It was kind of a number we had left. We thought that maybe we could do it, but we weren't sure. It may cover the cost of the actual lights, but that project went through the planning board approval process because that field was never permitted for lights. As part of that process, there was additional requirements put on it. The more engineers and staff dug into it, the site as a whole doesn't have the electrical capacity for those lights, so that has to be upgraded. The bases and a lot of the conduit work and stuff like that, although we could do a little of it, there's a lot more expense there than we anticipated. And then as a condition of approval, the planning board put on that the parking areas and the site have lighting as well, so that you're not there at night for a game in the dark and then, the parking lot's not lit and the walkways and stuff like that. So there's that additional expense, upgrading the site and facility. This is a rough number, could go up or down, but we don't know as of yet. Am I correct in that statement? It's something that we are exploring with electrical engineers to see if that will be enough.
And how, my understanding is we need a transformer out there? Is that?
That specifically, I'm not sure on. If it's, Chuck can speak to that.
I almost made it, without having to come up.
I told you.
Good afternoon. We don't know what we need yet. So our facilities manager happens to be a licensed master electrician who has gone out and taken a look at the site and indicated that what's out there isn't adequate for adding these types of high bay lighting. So we've allocated an amount of money to have an electrical engineer do a site evaluation and provide us with that answer. But when we look at just adding these lights, we also looked at the entire site plan, which included additional lighting for the soccer fields, which means that we can't just be looking at bringing in enough energy to satisfy the ball field lights. When we do this upgrade, we'll be upgrading for the future as well. And like Ephraim said, there's a function of ADA that requires an adequate amount of lighting if you're going to do anything in the evening or in the dark. So we don't want to have people show up and be tripping over themselves in the terrain to get out to the ball field from their cars. So you have to account for that lighting. You have to run the conduit for that lighting, bases and light poles as well. So it does get expensive quickly.
Got it. What it says here, this cost may go up or down.
In my general experience, down is not.
Yeah, it seems very optimistic.
So in fairness, I wrote that, and because we don't know. We just don't know. I think Chuck's right. Usually it goes up, but we just don't have enough information right now to tell you one way or another.
Got it. Could I also, I do want Cindy to come up and, because this is a large amount of money, and I want to make sure that it's really going to be utilized well. And
Well, the one thing I want to say is, so we the council allocated money towards the project. After we went through the approval process, we knew that that money was not going to work. This is an attempt to get us closer to it, maybe it working, if you want to continue with the project. And again, more funding may be required, we're not sure at this point. Could be less, could be more.
Well, you know who uses these fields better than anyone. I mean, is this the best use of these funds for the needs of the rec department and the town as a whole in terms of recreation?
Okay, so here's the deal. I got a few more years to retirement, okay? Let's just all be real about that. At least a few tree lightings.
Cindy counts everything at tree lightings.
How many more tree lightings am I in this game for? Look, that kind of money for one particular sport that serves one particular age group is not something that you saw the rec director come and ask you for.
So to clarify, I need some clarification. So the lighting plan is just for the diamond, the walkways to the parking area, and the parking area does not include the soccer fields out back?
Correct.
Okay.
It would include, potentially, if there's enough money here, upgrading it so that those fields, the system as a whole could accommodate those. But I mean, looking at it, each additional field, probably, if we did it all at the same time, $250,000, $300,000 more just for the light fixtures.
Right, so to keep this in perspective, we did the high school ball fields 2-3 years ago. Maybe I'm dating myself, I don't know. The infrastructure was already there except for the poles, and that was well in excess of $2+ million, if I remember right. So, I mean, I guess if we're comparing apples to apples here, I don't think $500,000 is gonna scratch the surface here, but maybe I'm wrong, so. And again, it's a more complex system, it dances and it does all kinds of stuff, right? But the infrastructure was already there, so the wiring was there, they didn't have to put transformer pads in.
How many fields did that cover?
Roby softball field, the baseball field, and the multi-purpose track soccer field, right?
Okay.
Were the three.
Many more fixtures.
Yeah, it's bigger.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's bigger. I'm not saying in comparison, but what I'm saying is the infrastructure was there already.
Yeah.
So if we're bringing and I get
Right.
what Chuck said is we have to plan for the future. So I mean, a transformer will be needed because we're planning for the future here. And if we can do it for 500, I get it because we could light the soccer fields up eventually, everything else. But I'm just very leery to think that $565,000 is going to get us across the finish line here. So, but again, this is a budget discussion. This is something we can talk about more at the actual vote. It's just more of a point of interest for me, so.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest concern is this just being a boondoggle where we're just throwing money after money after money in it. And I mean, just like, I just did the math really quickly. That's 43% of what we're allocating to fixing our roads. We're putting to just lights out a Little League field that will help one age group for one sport. And there's so many other projects in this town. So I get we can talk about it at the meeting, but I'm just, it makes me very wary seeing this and then not even.
Right, no, and the only thing that I can see as a benefit is we are talking about recreating Little Falls, right? And that being the expansion part of town. So if I'm looking at something that I say, okay, we do want to plan for the future on it, we want to make sure we have expansion capability. I know a lot of soccer gets played out there. So I got to look at this both ways, and I'm not quite sure which way I'm leaning at this point, but I know Little Falls is the next priority in town, and we're trying to do something there. So I'm not quite sure if it is or isn't the best use of our money at this point. I got to kind of outweigh the pros and the cons here, so.
Yeah, I think that like maybe we start with the electrical upgrades just to get the site prepped, because I mean, obviously, the master plan calls for all of it to be lighted at some point. I mean, if we all had it, billions of dollars, but I think maybe we just even start with the upgrades at this point with some of the money, because I know it was ARPA funds and things like that. So maybe that's something we start to just pick away at the master plan, because I feel like, I think I've said this before at meetings, we have bunches of master plans and then they get outdated and then we have to update them. And the town manager mentioned, you know, that there was a rec facility plan for the Schick property and now that's completely different. So I think we should start plugging away. I mean, this is the best use, is a good plan for Little Falls, and I think that if you did have lighted parking, a lot of more things could happen. I know the food trucks are in the summer, but things could happen at night out there. So, because I know sometimes in the winter and stuff like that, we lock the gate or we try to keep people out of there. I mean, if we could use it more, I think it would be great. So maybe we just, an idea is to just start with the electrical upgrades, maybe with some of the ARPA money or something else, but we can talk about that. The vote, so.
Cindy, before you sit down, because I know you're, you know, gearing to leave. I mean, if you had $500,000 for Little Falls for the purposes of recreation of any kind, where would you think would be the best place to put it?
Okay, again, I've got a few tree lightings left in my head.
Well, I think the fair question would be, Cindy, if you had more money for Little Falls, if you had a lot of money for Little Falls, where would you invest it to?
Well, let's look at logistics of that first field, Field 1, soccer field at Little Falls today. Even if that was the only parking lot and that one, now you're serving soccer, boy, girl, youth, adult. Now you're serving field hockey, if they wanted to be there. Now you're serving ultimate frisbee, middle, high school, others, community. Now you could serve lacrosse, boy, girl, all ages. That one facility, that one field could serve that vast a population. And that's kind of where I think that when you get the big bang, you know, you look at how many user groups can we get in one place. If you simply take those two little basketball courts at Schick property right now, okay, anybody can play basketball there, all ages, all people. Anybody can play pickleball there. Anybody can even play shuffleboard there. And then if you get real super cool, anybody can go on there and do cartwheels and whatever they want to do. How many times do we build something that serves 18,000 people? Well, Roby Park's going to serve 18,000 people.
Right.
So that's the kind of thing that, it's such a small population, so much money.
I think it's not to say that if we had the money, that's what it boils down to, is the limited resources.
Okay.
But we're happy to, if and when we get, well, we will, but when we get better information, we'll pass it along to the council. I'm just not sure when that's going to happen. We'll try very hard to get the best data we can before you take action on this budget, but I'll have to touch base with Chuck to find out where we're going to be.
Thank you.
No, we've been here a while. Any other questions on Capital Part 2? Any takers?
Easy one.
Thank you, Cindy.
So lob the softball.
And if somebody's watching this at home and made it this far and didn't fall asleep, there are 36 items in Capital Part 2 that are not, that's not the road funding item. Projects in various departments.
Ephraim, can you explain to the council, I guess, and the public, if we do approve these items or pass items, but that actually don't get done, there is a possibility, like in past budgets, that we've allocated money for something and we found out we didn't need that piece of equipment. The town council has the ability to reallocate funds if they aren't spent, so.
That's correct, yeah. If, not necessarily like if a budget is budgeted at $20,000 and it comes in at 19.5, that'll just roll into the general fund. But if a project can't move forward because something's happened, it's not enough money for some reason that we didn't anticipate. We had a project for safety improvements that couldn't materialize because the vendor had major issues, which we were very fortunate on that, but the council was able to reallocate that funding for another use at a public meeting. So it does happen from time to time. We can do that. Any other, I know you're trying to run for the door, any other questions on the budget, any department or anything that you want us to research between now and your public hearing vote?
Actually, could we just confirm the timeline? So the timeline for this is at the Tuesday, May 7th meeting, we'll have the public hearing?
No.
No, I can, let me pull that up. for you right
14th?
now. Is it the 14th? I can confirm that.
So
Yeah.
that's a special meeting.
There's a special meeting, yep.
Okay.
To be, the school department, because in fairness to them, they had a very quick turnaround, and then it was last year, the first year we did it earlier.
Yep.
We looked into the legality of doing it earlier, so it's the May 14th.
Yeah.
where
That's
there'll
just
be
a public hearing on the budget.
Public hearing on the school budget
On the
and a
school
council vote,
Yep.
as well as a public hearing on the town budget and a
And-
vote on the town.
All of that's happening on May the 14th?
Yes.
Got it, okay.
Yep, it's the budget meeting
And
of
we-
all
and
budgets.
at that same meeting is when we choose to approve or not?
Yep.
At the end of it?
Mhm.
Okay, got it.
And for anybody watching, the council will vote on the school budget at that meeting. There's only one vote on the town budget, but the school budget will go to a voter validation vote in June.
So we have just more clarification, we have a council meeting on the 7th and another council meeting on the 14th.
We get the most bang for the buck out of the council.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. You're all set?
All set?
Great.
I just wanted to say one thing, because I can.
Yeah.
Earlier, I wanted to thank the clerk's office for the hard work, but I really think that we owe a great thanks to all of the people who are making this town work as well as it does. And I appreciate the work that you've done, Ephraim.
Thank
in
you.
Leading all of this.
I do like 1%, and they do 99, so, but,
They'll
yes,
need a
I will
leader.
echo that. Thank you very much. All our department heads, managers, and then every employee we have make this possible, so, thank you.
Ditto.
Yep. Thank you.
All right.
Oh, it's raining again. Just